I had just started my shift at the hotel, cleaning the lobby, when I overheard something that stopped me in my tracks. It was one of those moments where you hear something so shocking that your body freezes, and for a second, you don't know whether to turn away or lean in closer. I was pushing a cart down the hallway when I heard the voice of Thomas Becket, one of the wealthiest men in the city. He was speaking loudly, his voice cutting through the air like a hot knife. "She's dead. My wife is dead, and there's no way around it," he said. His words hung heavy in the air, and I could feel the weight of them even though I was nowhere near him. I glanced up and saw his assistant, a man named Peter, looking solemn as he stood beside him. "I'm sorry, Mr. Becket, but I've just been told that there's no hope," Peter replied. There was a pause. "She's gone," Thomas repeated, his voice breaking. The words felt like a punch in the gut. I knew his wife had been in a car accident a few weeks ago, but I hadn't realized how serious it was. I hadn't realized just how much he was still holding on to the idea that she might somehow still be alive. As I continued to clean the area, I kept hearing snippets of their conversation. It wasn't just grief that filled Thomas's voice. There was a hint of denial, of someone who couldn't accept the truth. It was the kind of pain that was so raw, so fresh, it was almost suffocating. I've seen rich people come into the hotel all the time, businessmen, politicians, celebrities, but none of them had the kind of sadness in their eyes that Thomas did. His sorrow was palpable, and I could feel it in my chest like it was my own. I knew I had no business listening in on such a private conversation, but I couldn't help it. Something inside me told me that this was bigger than just a man mourning his wife. Then, something strange happened. I wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the office where Thomas and Peter were standing, but as fate would have it, I dropped my cleaning supplies in the hallway. The crash of the bottles startled me, and I couldn't stop myself from looking up. That's when I saw her, a young girl, no older than 12 or 13, standing near the door, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. She was clutching a small piece of paper in her hand, and I could see that she was trembling. Thomas hadn't noticed her at first, but Peter had. "What is it, sweetheart?" Peter asked gently, his voice soft. The girl didn't speak at first, but then, in a quiet voice, she said something that changed everything. "Your wife is still alive." I watched as Thomas froze. His body went rigid, and for a split second, he looked as though he was about to faint. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. "What did you just say?" Thomas asked, his voice barely a whisper. The girl looked up at him, her expression serious. "Your wife is still alive. I saw her. She was in a van, and she was calling for you. She's not dead." The room went completely silent. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. Thomas didn't say a word at first. He just stared at the girl as though he was trying to process what she had just said. There was a look of disbelief on his face, mixed with a strange glimmer of hope. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I saw her. She was there. They took her away in a van," the girl said again. Her voice was steady now, more confident. It was as though she had made up her mind that she wasn't going to back down. I could see Thomas's mind working, trying to figure out if this was some kind of cruel joke, some misunderstanding. But something in the way the girl spoke so sure, so certain made him pause. He stepped closer to her, his eyes never leaving her face. "How do you know this?" he demanded. "I saw her," the girl repeated. "She had a scar on her arm, a big one, like from an accident, and she kept calling for you." Thomas took a step back, his face now pale. His eyes flickered with a mix of confusion and fear. "This is insane," he muttered. "There's no way." But I could tell something had shifted in him. For the first time since I had seen him, there was a look of hope in his eyes. It was the smallest flicker of a possibility, a spark that he might just find out that his wife wasn't gone after all. For a moment, I thought he might break down right there, but instead, he straightened up and turned toward Peter. "Get the car. Now," he commanded. Peter looked confused but didn't argue. "We're going to find her," Thomas said, his voice filled with determination. "We're going to find my wife." The girl turned and walked away, disappearing down the hallway, leaving Thomas and Peter in their stunned silence. I stood there for a moment, not knowing what to do, still trying to wrap my head around what I had just heard. I knew it wasn't my place to be involved in this, but something in me told me that this was just the beginning of a much bigger story. And as Thomas Beckett rushed out of the hotel, his mind set on finding his wife, I couldn't help but wonder what secrets he was about to uncover and whether the girl knew more than she was letting on. I watched as Thomas Beckett stood still, his eyes locked onto the spot where the young girl had disappeared down the hallway. The weight of her words hung in the air, suffocating him. His mind raced, and for the first time, he felt an unfamiliar stirring of hope. It was almost as if the impossible had been suggested to him, something he had long since buried deep in his heart. His wife, Elena, whom he had mourned for weeks after her tragic car accident, might still be alive. The thought was too much to bear, yet it was all he could think about. Was it true? Could she still be out there? After all the months of grief, the endless reports of her death, could the girl have been right? He turned sharply to Peter, his assistant, his voice steady but filled with urgency. Get the car. We need to find her. Peter blinked, taken aback by the suddenness of the command. Sir, are you sure? This could be a mistake, Peter asked, his voice laced with confusion. But Thomas, for the first time in days, didn't hesitate. We don't have time for doubts. Get the car, Peter. Now. Peter, still processing the shock of the situation, nodded quickly and rushed off to arrange the car. Meanwhile, Thomas stood frozen, his gaze fixed on the ground, lost in thought. The girl's words echoed in his mind. She's not dead, she's alive. He couldn't shake the image of his wife, Elena, her face as clear in his memory as the day they had met. He could almost hear her voice in his mind, feel her touch as if she were right there. But the pain, the overwhelming pain of losing her, threatened to swallow him whole. He had been there when they had pulled her from the wreckage, lifeless and cold. The doctors had said there was no hope. He had buried her with his own hands. Yet now, this girl, this stranger, had planted a seed of doubt in his heart. What if they were wrong? What if the truth had been hidden all this time? The drive to the old warehouse where the girl said she had seen Elena was filled with silence. Thomas sat in the back of the car, his hands tightly gripping the armrests as the city's skyline blurred past. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. The girl had been so certain. She had described details that only someone who had actually seen Elena could know: the scar on her arm, the platinum blonde hair. No one else had ever mentioned those details. Could she be telling the truth? Was this some kind of elaborate trick, or had someone been keeping Elena hidden from him all along? The thought made his stomach churn. As the car pulled into the abandoned warehouse district, the air seemed to grow heavier. The building where the girl had claimed to have seen Elena was tucked away behind a chain-link fence, half hidden by overgrown bushes. Thomas couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. It was like stepping into another world, one where hope still lingered, despite the darkness. The car slowed to a stop, and Thomas stepped out, his feet crunching on the gravel beneath him. Peter and a couple of security guards followed close behind. The area was eerily quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic in the background. Thomas took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest as they approached the entrance to the warehouse. He could see a faint light coming from inside, and he motioned for the security team to stand back. He didn't know what he was walking into, but he couldn't stop now. He had to know the truth. The moment his foot crossed the threshold of the warehouse, a cold chill ran down his spine. The place was old and run down, with peeling walls and broken windows. But there, in the far corner, he saw something that made his heart skip a beat. A figure was standing in the shadows, illuminated by a single flickering light. It was her. It was Elena. Her face was gaunt, pale, but unmistakable. Her platinum blonde hair was shorter now, the color a little faded, but it was her. Thomas felt his breath catch in his throat as he stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Elena," he whispered, as if afraid to say her name too loudly, as if the sound of it would make her disappear again. Elena turned slowly, her eyes wide with fear. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, both unsure of what to say, both lost in the weight of the years that had passed. Finally, Elena spoke, her voice hoarse, almost unrecognizable. "Thomas," she said, her tone filled with disbelief and confusion. "How did you find me?" Her words were filled with a mixture of shock and relief. It was as if she had been waiting for this moment, but never truly expecting it to happen. Thomas stood there, frozen in place, as the truth finally began to sink in. He wasn't dreaming. Elena was alive, and somehow, she had been hidden from him all this time. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. How had she survived? Why had she been kept away from him? And who was behind this elaborate ruse to convince him that she was dead? The questions flooded his mind, but the answers would have to wait. All that mattered now was that she was here. She was alive. For the first time in weeks, Thomas felt something other than grief. It was hope, a fragile and tentative hope, but hope nonetheless. And as he reached out to touch her, to pull her into his arms, he realized that this moment, this reunion, was just the beginning of a much bigger story, one that would uncover dark secrets and reveal a truth he never could have imagined. I stood there in disbelief, staring at Elena. She was real, standing right in front of me. After everything, the pain, the grief, the months of wondering if I'd ever find peace, it felt like a dream. I wanted to rush to her, to hold her, to never let her go, but something in her eyes stopped me. There was something wrong. She didn't seem the same. She had survived, yes, but she looked different, as if the past months had carved into her in ways I couldn't understand. The woman I once knew was now a stranger, her face hollow, her eyes distant. She wasn't the woman I had lost. She was someone new, someone who had endured far more than I could have imagined. My heart pounded in my chest as I took a step closer, my voice barely a whisper. Elena, where have you been? Why didn't you try to contact me? I thought you were dead. I thought I lost you. Elena looked down at the floor, her hands trembling. I didn't have a choice, Thomas, she said softly, her voice shaking. I couldn't let you find me. It wasn't safe. They would have killed me. Her words struck me like a blow to the stomach. Who was she talking about? Who could want to hurt Elena? And why hadn't she reached out sooner? Why had she let me believe she was gone? I felt a wave of anger rise within me, but I swallowed it down, forcing myself to stay calm. Who, Elena? Who would do this to you? And why didn't you trust me enough to tell me the truth? We could have figured this out together. Elena's eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw the pain in them, the deep, raw pain that had been hidden for so long. She swallowed hard, then spoke in a low voice. It's not that simple, Thomas. I didn't want to drag you into this. I thought you'd be safer without knowing. I had to protect you. And when I found out the truth, I realized there was no way out. No one could help me, not even you. My mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle she was creating. I knew she had been in a car accident, that much was clear. But this was something far deeper, darker, and more dangerous than I could have imagined. What truth, Elena? What are you talking about? She closed her eyes for a moment, as though gathering her strength. Then she looked at me again, her gaze steady but filled with fear. Thomas, it's not just about the accident. That's what they want you to think. The truth is, they faked my death. They made everyone believe I was dead. They set up the crash, the body, the whole thing. But I was never really gone. I was being kept somewhere, held captive, my breath caught in my throat. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. What? Who did this to you? Who would go that far? Elena shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. I don't know exactly who they are, Thomas, but they're powerful. They have resources, connections. They made sure no one would ever find me. And when I tried to get away, they brought me here. They kept me in hiding, under watch, for months. It wasn't until recently that I found a way to escape. My mind was spinning. Elena, alive all this time, locked away somewhere, a victim of some cruel, unimaginable plot. It didn't make sense. None of it did. I felt a rush of guilt flood over me. All these months, I had mourned her, not knowing she was out there, suffering. And now, standing in front of me, was the woman I loved. But she was broken. She wasn't the same. Elena, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I thought you were gone. I thought I had lost you forever. I reached out to her, my hands trembling. We can fix this, Elena. We'll figure out who did this to you. I won't let them get away with it. Elena stepped back, her face filled with hesitation. It's not that simple, Thomas. These people, they have eyes everywhere. They'll come for me again, and they won't stop until they get what they want. I stood there, my heart racing, my mind in a whirlwind. The woman I had been mourning, the woman I thought I had lost, was here, but she wasn't safe, she wasn't free, and neither of us was. But there was a spark of hope, a tiny flicker of something that hadn't been there before. I knew now that I had to help her. I had to fight for her, for us. We were in this together, no matter the cost. Elena had been through hell, and I was going to help her find a way out. I could see the hesitation in Elena's eyes, the fear, the uncertainty. She was alive, but the past months had changed her in ways I couldn't fully understand. The woman standing before me wasn't the same one I had married. She had seen too much, been through too much, and the scars ran deeper than I could see. I reached out to her, my hand trembling slightly. "Elena, we have to find out who did this to you. Who's behind all this?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but there was a crack in it. She took a step back, as if she wanted to pull away, but I could tell she was just as desperate for answers as I was. "I don't know, Thomas. I don't even know who to trust anymore," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "All I know is that they're dangerous, and they've been watching me this entire time. They know I'm here." The weight of her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had always believed that if we fought, we could win, but now I saw how deep the darkness ran. I had no idea who they were, but the way Elena spoke about them, the fear in her voice, made it clear that they weren't just some random group. They had power, influence, and resources far beyond anything I could have imagined. I wanted to tell her that everything would be fine, that we would figure it out, but I knew better than to make false promises. "We'll get through this," I said, my voice firm, though doubt still lingered in my mind. Elena's eyes flashed with something anger, maybe, or frustration, and she let out a small, bitter laugh. "You think so?" she said, shaking her head. "You think we can just waltz in and take down people like that? People who have everything? They'll crush us, Thomas. They've already crushed me." Her words stung more than I was willing to admit. She was right. Whoever these people were, they had already broken her, and I wasn't sure we could fix it, but I wasn't about to give up. Not now. Not when she was right here in front of me, alive and breathing. "We'll find a way," I said again, my voice stronger this time. "You're not alone in this, Elena. I'm here, and I won't stop fighting for you." She looked at me for a long moment, as if she was searching for something in my eyes. Then, finally, she sighed and nodded, but I could see the doubt still clouding her gaze. "I don't know if that's enough, Thomas," she said quietly. "I don't know if anything can stop them now." I had to believe that it was. I had to believe that we could overcome this. But as I looked at her, standing there in the shadows, with the weight of everything she had been through weighing her down, I knew it wouldn't be easy. Nothing about this would be easy, but I had to try. For her, for us. We spent the next few hours talking in hushed voices, trying to piece together what had happened. Elena told me everything she could remember, but it was all fragmented, pieces of a nightmare that didn't make sense. She had been abducted right after the crash, taken to a secluded location, and held captive by a group of people who wanted something from her. But what? That was the question that kept eating at me. Why Elena? Why her of all people? And who was behind this? Elena had told me they faked her death, but how had they pulled it off? It seemed impossible. Yet, here we were. The more she spoke, the more it became clear just how high the stakes were. These people, whoever they were, had orchestrated her disappearance, erased all traces of her, and kept her in hiding, all while the world believed she was gone. It was like a conspiracy of epic proportions, and I was stuck in the middle of it, trying to unravel a mystery that seemed unsolvable. As Elena finished recounting what she could see how exhausted she was. Her words were heavy with the burden of the past months, and her shoulders sagged as if she was carrying the weight of the world. I wanted to pull her into my arms, to shield her from everything that had happened, but I knew that wouldn't fix anything. We had to face this together. I had to be strong for both of us. "We need a plan," I said, taking a deep breath. "We can't just sit here and wait for them to come for us. We need to get ahead of them. We need to figure out who's behind this and how we can stop them." Elena looked at me, her expression unreadable. "And how do you propose we do that?" she asked, her voice tinged with skepticism. "We have no allies, no resources. We're out of our depth, Thomas. I've seen how these people operate. They won't hesitate to destroy anyone who gets in their way. I could see the truth in her words. This wasn't just about us anymore. It was about something bigger, something far more dangerous than I had imagined. But I couldn't back down. Not now. We start by finding out everything we can, I said, my voice steady. We dig into their connections, their network, everything. We're not going to sit here and wait for them to make the next move. We're going to take the fight to them. Elena's eyes softened, but I could tell she was still afraid, still unsure. You're crazy, you know that? She said, a small, sad smile playing on her lips. But I guess, if anyone can make it work, it's you. I reached out and took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. We're in this together, Elena. I won't let you go again. I spent the next few days in a blur of planning, strategizing, and trying to figure out our next move. Elena was still adjusting to the reality of being free, though I could see the walls she had built around herself. She wasn't the same person I had known. There was a hardness to her now, a caution that I hadn't seen before. It broke my heart to see her like this, but I knew I couldn't force her to open up. She needed time, and we both needed answers. We started gathering information, trying to piece together the mystery of who was behind Elena's captivity. I used my contacts, pulling every string I could, reaching out to people I trusted. But no matter where I looked, there were no leads, no real answers. Everything felt like a dead end. Meanwhile, Elena spent hours in her room, going over everything she remembered about the people who had kept her. She wrote down names, places, and any little detail she could recall. But her memory was fragmented, and much of it was clouded by the trauma she had endured. I couldn't blame her for that. I had no idea what she had gone through, and I wouldn't pretend to understand. But I knew that if we were going to find the truth, we had to keep pushing. One night, as I sat in the kitchen, poring over a stack of papers, I heard Elena's voice from behind me. "Thomas," she said quietly, her tone almost hesitant. I turned, surprised to see her standing there, looking at me with a mix of determination and uncertainty. "I think I remember something," she said, stepping forward. "Something important." My heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" I asked, pushing the papers aside and focusing entirely on her. She looked down for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts. "I don't know if it will help, but I think I remember one of their names. A man. His name is Richard Blake. He's the one who watched over me, kept me there. I don't know much about him, but I remember his face. He was the one who made sure I never tried to escape. He was the one who spoke to me the most." My pulse quickened as I processed the information. "Richard Blake," I repeated, the name sticking in my mind like a sharp thorn. "We need to find out everything we can about him." Elena nodded, her eyes distant. "I don't know where he is now, but I know he's powerful. He's connected to someone in the government, someone with a lot of influence. I don't know exactly who, but I remember him saying something about being in charge of a private project. Something secret." My mind raced as I considered the implications. A government connection? A secret project? This was getting more dangerous by the minute. But we had a name now, and that was a start. "We'll find him," I said, my voice firm. "We'll get the answers we need." The next few days were spent tracking down Richard Blake. It wasn't easy. His name didn't show up on any official records, and every lead we followed seemed to go cold. But we didn't stop. We kept digging, using every resource at our disposal, and finally, after what felt like an eternity, we found something. A contact of mine came through with a small piece of information. Richard Blake wasn't just some low-level operative. He was a high-ranking member of a private security firm with ties to several powerful individuals in both the political and business world. His firm had been involved in several high-profile security contracts, most of which were shrouded in secrecy. The more I learned about him, the more I realized how deep this rabbit hole went. Blake was connected to people who had the power to make things disappear, people who could cover their tracks, who could erase someone's existence without leaving a trace. It was the kind of power that made me sick to my stomach. But I also knew that if we were going to get Elena the justice she deserved, we had to go after them. We couldn't let them keep getting away with this. I couldn't let them take her from me again. We started making plans to confront Richard Blake. It wasn't something we could do lightly. This was a dangerous game we were playing, and we knew that if we made a wrong move, it could cost us everything. But we had come this far, and there was no turning back now. Elena had been through hell, and I wasn't going to let anyone else suffer the way she had. As we prepared for what was to come, Elena seemed to withdraw even more. She didn't talk much, didn't say anything about the plan we had in place. She just kept her head down, staying in her room or pacing around the house, like she was waiting for something, or someone, to show up. I couldn't blame her for being scared. I was scared too, but I knew we couldn't let that fear stop us. We had come this far, and now we had to finish what we started. The day of the confrontation came, and I could feel the tension in the air. Elena and I were in the car, headed toward a location we had managed to track down as one of Richard Blake's known safe houses. It was a long drive, and the silence between us was heavy, filled with the weight of everything that had happened. Elena's eyes were closed, her face pale as she sat next to me, but there was something different in her demeanor now. It wasn't just the fear I had seen before, it was determination. She was ready. She was ready to take back what had been stolen from her. We arrived at the location, and I felt my heart pounding in my chest. This was it, the moment we had been waiting for. The truth was within our reach, but so was the danger. I turned to Elena, who had already unbuckled her seatbelt and was ready to go. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" I asked, my voice low. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a fire I hadn't seen in weeks. "We don't have a choice, Thomas," she said, her voice steady. "This is the only way." And with that, we stepped out of the car, ready to face the unknown. I could feel the weight of the moment as Elena and I stood in front of the rundown building that was supposed to be Richard Blake's safe house. The cold wind bit at my skin, and the silence between us was deafening. Every step we took toward the door felt heavier, like the universe was holding its breath, waiting to see if we were brave enough to keep going. Elena was quiet beside me, her expression unreadable, but I could see the tightness in her shoulders. I knew she was scared. I was scared too. The air around us was thick with tension, and every creak of the floorboards under our feet seemed to echo through the building. I looked at Elena, trying to read her thoughts, but all I saw was determination mixed with a fear I couldn't shake. She had been through so much already, and now, here we were, about to confront the man who had caused all this pain. I couldn't help but wonder if we were ready for what we were about to face. Would we be able to take down Richard Blake? Would we survive this encounter, or had we bitten off more than we could chew? I could see her hands shaking slightly, but she didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I knew that look in her eyes. She wasn't backing down. She had been taken from me once, and now she was here, fighting to get her life back. She wasn't going to let anyone take that away from her again. I took a deep breath, forcing the anxiety in my chest to calm down. We couldn't afford to be afraid. Not now, not when we were so close to the truth. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding in my chest. We had no idea what was waiting for us on the other side, but it didn't matter. We had come this far. Elena's life depended on us finishing this. A voice from inside the building responded, low and muffled. "Who's there?" It was a man's voice, familiar but distant, and my blood ran cold when I recognized it. Richard Blake. My hand gripped the doorknob, but I didn't turn it right away. For a moment, I just stood there, listening. I could feel Elena's presence beside me, her body stiff with tension. I could tell she was holding her breath, waiting for something to happen, waiting for the confrontation to begin. And then, without another second to waste, I turned the doorknob and pushed the door open. The room beyond was dimly lit, the air stale and thick with the smell of dust and old furniture. Richard Blake was sitting at a table, his back turned to us, but as soon as he heard the door open, he turned slowly. His eyes widened in surprise when he saw us standing in the doorway. "Thomas," he said, his voice cold and calculating. "And Elena, I didn't think you'd come back. I thought you were too far gone." His words cut through the air like a knife, and I could feel the anger rising within me. "You don't get to talk like that," I said, my voice steady but laced with fury. "You don't get to control anything anymore." Blake smirked, leaning back in his chair, his eyes flicking between Elena and me. "I control everything," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "You've been gone for so long, Elena. You have no idea what you've walked into." His words made my blood boil, but I kept my cool. This was it. The moment we had been waiting for. The truth was finally within our reach, and nothing, no matter how dangerous, was going to stop us now. "You took everything from her," I said, stepping forward, my voice low but filled with conviction. "And now we're taking it back." Blake's smile faltered for a moment, and I could see the flicker of fear in his eyes. He stood up from the table slowly, his posture tense, like he was preparing for something. I didn't know if it was a fight or something worse, but I knew we weren't leaving without answers. "You think you can just waltz in here and take control?" Blake said, his voice harder now. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. I've been in this game too long to let anyone like you destroy everything I've built." He reached into his coat pocket, and for a moment, I thought he was going for a weapon. My heart skipped a beat, and I instinctively took a step back, ready for whatever he was about to pull. But instead, Blake pulled out a small, folded piece of paper and tossed it onto the table in front of us. "Here's the truth," he said, his eyes glinting with a cold, almost predatory satisfaction. "You want to know what I've done? You want to know why I've kept Elena from you? You're about to find out." I stared at the paper, my mind racing. This was it, the moment we had been waiting for. I could feel Elena's presence beside me, the weight of everything we had been through pressing down on us. "Take it," Blake said, his voice almost mocking. "It's all there, everything you need to know. But be warned, Thomas, some truths are better left buried." I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering over the paper, but then I reached forward and grabbed it. The truth was finally within our grasp, and no matter what it cost us, we had to see it through. I stood there, staring at the small, folded piece of paper that Richard Blake had tossed onto the table. My heart was pounding, my mind racing. This was the moment we had been waiting for, the moment when everything would finally make sense. I knew that whatever was on that paper would change everything. Elena stood next to me, her body stiff, her eyes narrowed with a mix of fear and anticipation. She knew as well as I did that this was it. We were on the edge of something much bigger than we could have ever imagined. I unfolded the paper slowly, my hands trembling, and began to read. The words on the page made my blood run cold. The first few lines were simple enough. Names, dates, locations. But, as I read further, it became clear that this wasn't just some ordinary list of events. The names were familiar, some of them connected to powerful people I had known in the past, politicians, businessmen, even law enforcement officials. But there was one name that stood out above all the rest: Richard Blake. It wasn't just that his name appeared on the paper. It was the context in which it was mentioned. The paper detailed an intricate web of corruption, manipulation, and lies, with Blake at the center of it all. He had been orchestrating a massive cover-up, using his power and influence to erase people from existence, to silence anyone who threatened his empire. Elena was one of his victims. The details on the paper confirmed what we had feared: Elena's abduction. Her death, everything, had been a carefully planned operation to eliminate her as a threat. She had been targeted because of what she knew, because she had stumbled upon something that Blake couldn't afford to let get out. It was all right there in front of me. A conspiracy so vast that it stretched across every level of power, from the highest echelons of government to the darkest corners of corporate greed. My stomach churned as I read the last few lines, the truth finally sinking in. Elena wasn't just some random victim. She had been chosen because of her connection to something much bigger. She had known too much. She had seen too much. I looked up at her, my mind struggling to process the enormity of what we had just uncovered. Elena's face was pale, her eyes distant, as though she had already known all of this deep down. She had lived it, after all. She had been the one held captive, the one who had suffered, while the world had been led to believe she was dead. Now, the truth was out, and it was more horrifying than I could have ever imagined. This is insane," I whispered, my voice thick with disbelief. "Blake's been hiding this all along. He's been pulling the strings, controlling everything from the shadows." Elena nodded slowly, her expression grim. "I told you," she said softly. "I told you they would come for me if they knew what I knew. They had to silence me, Thomas. They couldn't let anyone find out what I had seen." I felt a surge of anger flood through me, but I pushed it down. This wasn't the time for anger. This was the time for action. We had to figure out what to do with this information. How to expose Blake for what he really was. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how dangerous this was. We were up against powerful people, people who had the means to make anyone disappear without a trace. They had done it before. They had done it to Elena. And if they found out we were on to them, they wouldn't hesitate to take us down too. We need to go public, I said, my voice steady despite the fear building in my chest. We need to expose this, make it known. If we go to the authorities, if we can get this out there, then Blake's done. He won't be able to hide anymore. Elena shook her head slowly, her eyes filled with caution. You don't understand, Thomas, she said. These people, they control everything. They have eyes everywhere. The authorities are part of it. They'll shut us down before we even get started. Her words were like ice water pouring over my head. I hadn't considered that. How could I have been so naive? If Blake really had that much power, going to the authorities would be a death sentence. We needed a different plan. We needed to fight back, but we had to do it carefully. So what do we do now? I asked, my voice low. Elena met my gaze, her face set with determination. We take them down ourselves, she said, her voice strong. We gather everything we can, expose them piece by piece. We don't give them a chance to retaliate. I could see the fire in her eyes, the same fire that had kept her alive all these months. I knew she was right. We couldn't rely on anyone else to save us. We had to take control of our own fate, and we would do whatever it took to bring Richard Blake and his entire network to justice. This was just the beginning. The truth was out, and there was no going back. I could feel the weight of the moment as I looked at Elena, standing there beside me. We had come so far, uncovered so much, and now, with the truth finally out, it was time to take the next step. But as I stood there, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling of dread that was slowly creeping up on me. Everything we had done, everything we had risked, was leading us to this point. But the reality of the danger we were facing was settling in. The people we were up against weren't just powerful, they were ruthless, and they wouldn't hesitate to do whatever it took to protect their secrets. We had no choice but to fight. But as I stared at the pile of evidence on the table, I couldn't help but wonder if we were really prepared for what was coming. Elena turned to me, her face set with determination, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She wasn't fooling anyone. We both knew that what we were about to do was going to change everything. We can't go back now, she said quietly, her voice steady but with an edge of uncertainty. There's no turning back, Thomas. If we do this, there's no guarantee we'll make it out. I nodded slowly, my chest tight. I know. But we don't have a choice. We have to expose them. We can't let them get away with this. I reached for the folder of documents on the table, the ones we had painstakingly gathered over the past few days. Every piece of information in that folder was a key to unlocking the truth, but we needed to be careful. One wrong move, and it could all fall apart. We need to go to the press, I said, my voice low. We need to get this out in the open, to everyone. If we do this right, we can force their hand. We'll make them reveal everything. Elena shook her head, a small frown creasing her brow. That's too risky, she said. If they catch wind of what we're planning, they'll come for us. They'll stop us before we even get a chance to speak out. I knew she was right. The stakes were higher than ever. If we went to the press, if we exposed them publicly, we would be putting ourselves in the crosshairs of people who had no problem eliminating anyone who stood in their way. But we couldn't let fear control us. Not now. We had been afraid for too long. It was time to take control of our own fate. Then we do it our way, I said firmly, standing up and pacing the room. We won't go to the press, but we'll take what we know and use it. We'll go straight to the people who can make a difference. Elena looked at me for a long moment, her eyes searching mine as if she was trying to read my thoughts. Who? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Who can we trust? I stopped pacing and turned to face her, my mind racing. We needed someone who had the power to take down Blake and his network, someone who wasn't afraid to go up against them, someone with the resources and influence to get things done. And then it hit me. There was one person who had the power to make it all happen. Charles Mason. He was one of the few people in this world who could stand up to Blake and his people. and he had a history of fighting against corruption. I had worked with him in the past on a few smaller projects, but I knew that he had the connections, the money, and the will to help us take down Blake. The question was, would he be willing to risk everything to help us? Elena's eyes widened slightly as she saw the realization in my expression. "Charles Mason?" she asked, her voice full of disbelief. "You think he'll help us?" I nodded slowly. "He's our best shot. If we can convince him that we have the evidence and the support, he'll help us. But we need to move fast. The longer we wait, the more time Blake and his people have to cover their tracks." Elena hesitated, her face tense with doubt. What if we're wrong? What if Mason turns us away? What if he's not the ally we think he is? The doubt in her voice was justified. I understood her hesitation. We were putting everything on the line, and if we made the wrong choice, it could all fall apart. But we had no choice but to trust him. If we didn't, we would never get the chance to bring Blake and his network down. "We don't have time for second-guessing," I said, my voice firm. "We have to do this now. We've come too far to back down now. It's the only way." Elena nodded slowly, her face a mixture of fear and determination. "All right," she said quietly. "Let's do it." We both knew the risks. We both knew what was at stake, but there was no turning back now. It was time to take the fight to Blake and his network. We were ready, and together, we would do whatever it took to bring the truth to light. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I dialed Charles Mason's number. The phone rang in my ear, each second stretching into what felt like an eternity. I glanced at Elena, who was standing next to me, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her expression unreadable. We were about to take the most dangerous step of all, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down on both of us. Charles was our last hope. If he didn't agree to help, there was no telling what would happen next. The line clicked, and then Charles's familiar voice came through, calm and controlled, as always. "Thomas, what's going on?" he asked. "I need your help," I said, my voice low but firm. "It's urgent. I've got something you need to see, something that could take down Richard Blake and the entire network he's built." There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by a sigh. "I don't have time for games, Thomas," he said, his voice sharp now. "You know how risky this is. You know the people we're dealing with. You've got to be sure this isn't some trap." I could hear the doubt in his voice, and I understood it. Charles wasn't the type to take risks without being absolutely sure of his footing. But I also knew that if anyone could help us, it was him. "I'm sure," I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my chest. "We have everything we need. The truth is right in front of us, and I know you're the only one with the power to help us expose it. If we don't act fast, they'll cover their tracks, and this will all be for nothing." There was another long silence before Charles spoke again. "All right," he said finally, his voice softened with resignation. "Where are you?" I told him the address, and he promised to meet us within the hour. As I hung up the phone, I looked at Elena. Her face was still hard, but I could see the smallest flicker of hope in her eyes. "He's in," I said, a sigh of relief escaping my lips. "We have a shot." Elena nodded slowly, her lips pressing together in a thin line. "I don't trust him," she said quietly, almost to herself. "But we don't have a choice." I understood her hesitation. Trusting anyone right now felt like a gamble. But Charles Mason was our only chance, and if he backed us, we would have the means to take down Richard Blake and everyone who had been complicit in Elena's suffering. The hour seemed to drag on, every minute feeling like an eternity. I paced back and forth, going over the plan in my head, while Elena sat on the couch, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. She was nervous, I could tell, though she was trying hard to hide it. When Charles finally arrived, I felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. He was exactly as I remembered, tall, wearing a suit that spoke of power, his face lined with experience. He stepped inside without saying a word, and immediately closed the door behind him. "Let's see what we're dealing with," he said, his voice low as he motioned for me to show him the evidence. I handed him the folder, and he immediately began flipping through the papers, his expression unreadable. "This is bigger than I thought," he muttered after a moment, pausing on one of the pages. "You weren't kidding. If this is true, we've got a huge problem on our hands." I nodded, my heart racing as I watched him process the information. We need to act fast, Charles. We need to take down Blake and his network before they can silence us. Charles met my gaze, his eyes hard. I'll help you. But we're going to need more than just this evidence to bring him down. We need leverage. We need something that will make them back off. And we need to be ready to move quickly. If we do this, there's no going back. His words sent a chill down my spine. There was no turning back now. We had already crossed the line. This was no longer just about Elena and me. It was about taking down a corrupt empire, about exposing the people who had been hiding in the shadows for far too long. What do you need from us? I asked, my voice steady despite the anxiety tightening in my chest. I'll get the resources, Charles said, flipping through the folder again. But I need to know everything. I need names, locations, and any details you can give me about their operations. This is going to be a war, and we can't afford to make any mistakes. I nodded, looking at Elena. She had been through so much already, and I could see the weight of the decision in her eyes. But she wasn't backing down. Neither was I. We'll get you everything, I said, my voice firm. We'll do whatever it takes to make sure they're exposed. Charles stood up, his eyes hard with determination. Good. We'll make sure Blake doesn't see this coming. As he left, I turned to Elena. She was silent for a moment, her face pale, but then she looked at me and nodded. We're doing the right thing, Thomas, she said softly. This is the only way. I nodded back, my chest tight with the weight of what was to come. We had taken the first step, and there was no turning back now. The war for the truth had just begun. I could feel the tension building with every passing moment. The plan had been set in motion, but now it was time to wait and see how it would all unfold. Charles Mason had promised to mobilize his resources, but we had no way of knowing how long it would take before we had everything we needed to make our next move. I sat at the kitchen table, the folder of evidence sitting in front of me like a ticking time bomb. Elena stood by the window, her back turned to me, her eyes fixed on something far in the distance. I could tell she was still processing everything that had happened, still coming to terms with the fact that her life had been turned upside down by forces far beyond our control. But I could see something else in her too. A fire, a determination that hadn't been there before. We had come so far, and now there was no turning back. No matter how dangerous it got, we were going to take down Richard Blake and everyone who had helped him build his empire of lies. Are you all right? I asked softly, not wanting to break her concentration, but needing to make sure she was still with me in this fight. Elena turned slowly, her eyes locking onto mine. There was a hint of sadness there, but also something else. Strength. I'm fine, she said, her voice steady. It's just hard to believe we're this close to taking him down. After everything he's done, after everything he's taken from me, it doesn't seem real. I nodded, my stomach tightening at the thought of everything she had been through. The lies, the manipulation, the isolation. No one deserved that, least of all Elena. It's real, I said, my voice firm. We have the evidence, we have the truth, and we're going to make sure everyone knows what he's done. No more hiding, no more lies. Elena gave me a small, almost imperceptible smile. I just hope we're not too late, she whispered. Just as she spoke those words, my phone buzzed on the table. I reached for it, my pulse quickening as I saw Charles's name on the screen. I picked it up, my breath held in anticipation. Charles, I said, my voice steady but filled with urgency. What do we have? There was a long pause before Charles's voice came through, low and serious. It's worse than we thought, Thomas, he said. The network we're dealing with goes much deeper than Richard Blake. He's just the tip of the iceberg. I've dug into their operations, and I'm telling you, this is big. These people have their hands in everything: government, corporate, private security. They've been covering up illegal activities for years, and Blake's not the only one who needs to be exposed. My heart sank as I listened to him. I had known we were up against something dangerous, but this was a whole different level. I could feel Elena's eyes on me, but I didn't look up. I needed to focus. What do we do now? I asked, my mind racing. We have to move quickly, Charles replied. I've arranged a meeting with some key people who can help us take this to the next level, but we need to be careful. There are people in high places who won't hesitate to bury this if they can. We can't trust anyone until we have all the facts. I clenched my jaw. It wasn't the answer I wanted to hear, but I knew he was right. We couldn't trust anyone. Not yet. When's the meeting? I asked. Tomorrow morning, Charles replied. Be there. I'll give you the details when you arrive. I hung up the phone and turned to Elena. Her face was pale, and I could see the weight of everything we were about to do pressing down on her. She took a deep breath, exhaling slowly. Tomorrow, she said quietly. Tomorrow we take him down. I nodded, though my stomach was in knots. The meeting with Charles was the next step, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into the lion's den. There was so much we didn't know, so many things that could go wrong, but we had no choice. We had already come this far. And now, there was no going back. The next morning, we drove to the location Charles had given us. It was an old building, tucked away in a quiet part of town, the kind of place where no one would think to look, but one that could hide all sorts of secrets. As we walked inside, I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. This was it. This was the final step. We were about to confront the people behind the network, the people who had destroyed Elena's life. Charles was already there, standing with a few others, all of them serious, their faces set with the same determination I had seen in Elena's eyes. Charles stepped forward, giving me a brief nod. This is it, he said, his voice low. We either expose them today, or they'll bury us before we get the chance. I nodded, my heart racing. This was our moment. We had everything we needed to bring them down. It was now or never. I could feel the tension in the air as Charles, Elena, and I entered the building, the concrete walls around us damp and cold, reflecting the weight of the task we were about to undertake. The time had come to confront the dark network that had caused so much destruction, not only to Elena's life but to so many others caught in the web of corruption. I could hear the echo of our footsteps reverberating through the hallway, each step feeling heavier than the last. We were walking into the lion's den, and the stakes had never been higher. As we moved deeper into the building, Charles led the way. He was the man who had promised us a shot at redemption, but even his confident strides couldn't mask the caution in his eyes. The people we were about to meet had the power to make or break everything. The documents we had gathered, the evidence we had painstakingly put together, were all we had. If we showed up with anything less than a full commitment, they would tear us apart without hesitation. I glanced over at Elena, her face set with determination, but I could see the flicker of fear in her eyes. This was it. This was the moment we either succeeded or failed. There was no in-between. I reached for her hand, offering her what little reassurance I could. She gave me a small nod, but her grip was tight, and I could feel her pulse racing. We reached the door to the meeting room, and Charles knocked once, then pushed the door open. Inside, a group of well-dressed individuals sat around a large polished table, their eyes sharp, calculating. The room was silent, the air thick with an intensity that made it clear that nothing here was left to chance. Charles stepped inside first, followed by Elena and me. Everyone, this is Thomas and Elena, Charles said, his voice steady but carrying an edge. The room was filled with people I didn't recognize, their faces unreadable. One man, seated at the far end of the table, stood up. He was tall, with dark hair and a stern expression. He looked like someone who had spent his entire life in control, someone who would stop at nothing to maintain that control. I'm glad you could join us, he said, his voice smooth but cold. I trust Charles has filled you in on the details? I nodded, stepping forward. We have the evidence. We have everything you need to take down Richard Blake and expose his entire operation. But we need your help to make it public. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Help? He repeated, as if the word didn't quite fit. You think you can just walk in here and ask for our help? He glanced at the others in the room, and they exchanged knowing looks. This is more complicated than you realize, he continued. You've done your part, but you're not the ones with the power to end this. We control that. His words stung, but I didn't back down. You control nothing, I said, my voice steady but filled with conviction. We have everything. We can bring Blake down, and we'll make sure the world knows exactly what he's been doing. But we can't do it alone. We need you to move quickly. If we wait, they'll cover their tracks. They'll destroy us." The man stared at me for a long moment, his eyes calculating. Then, slowly, he sat back down. "And what exactly do you want from us?" he asked. I could feel the room holding its breath, waiting for my response. This was the moment where everything hinged on one decision. "We need you to help us get the evidence to the authorities," I said, my voice firm. "We need to make sure Blake is exposed for what he is, and we need to do it in a way that makes it impossible for him to escape the consequences." The man leaned back in his chair, studying me carefully. "You think that's all it takes? You think this is just about exposing a man?" he asked, his voice tinged with amusement. "Richard Blake is only the tip of the iceberg. What you've uncovered is just a small part of something much bigger, something much more dangerous. Exposing him will only create a ripple. To truly bring this down, you need to take down the whole system, and that's where we come in." The weight of his words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had known it wouldn't be easy, but I hadn't fully understood just how deep this went. Blake wasn't working alone. He was part of a much larger operation, a network of people who had their hands in everything, pulling the strings from the shadows. "What are you saying?" Elena asked, her voice sharp. "You want us to help you take down the entire system?" The man nodded slowly. "Exactly," he said. "But be warned, if you go down this path, there's no going back. Once we expose everything, the whole world will know, and there will be no one left to protect you. You'll be out in the open, vulnerable. If you can live with that, then we'll help you." I turned to Elena, searching her eyes for any sign of doubt, but there was none. She was ready. We were both ready. "We don't have a choice," I said, my voice steady. "We've come this far, and we're not backing down now." Elena nodded, her jaw clenched, her eyes fierce. "We're in," she said, her voice unwavering. The man smiled, though his eyes remained cold. "Then let's begin." I could feel the weight of everything we had been working for pressing down on us as Charles, Elena, and I walked out of the building. The meeting had been tense, but I could tell that we had made progress. We were no longer just fighting for Elena's freedom, we were fighting for the truth. But with each step we took, the realization of what lay ahead hit harder and harder. Charles had made it clear. Taking down Richard Blake wasn't enough. We had to take down the entire system that he was a part of. I had hoped that exposing Blake would be the end of it, that once we brought him to justice, everything would be over. But now I knew it wasn't that simple. This wasn't just about one man, it was about a network of powerful individuals who had been hiding in plain sight, manipulating everything for their own gain. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized just how dangerous the road ahead would be. We were up against something much bigger than we had initially believed, and every step we took brought us closer to a point of no return. The next few days were a blur of meetings, planning, and gathering more information. We spent hours with Charles and his contacts, trying to get a clearer picture of the network we were up against. Every lead we followed seemed to open up new doors, leading us further into the heart of the conspiracy. But each new piece of information also brought more danger. The more we learned, the more we realized how much was at stake. We couldn't trust anyone, not even the people who had promised to help us. I saw it in Elena's eyes, the doubt, the fear, the realization that there was no turning back. But there was also something else, determination. She wasn't going to let them win, not after everything she had been through. We couldn't stop now. By the time the final meeting was arranged, I could feel the tension in the air, thick and palpable. We were about to confront the people who had been pulling the strings, the ones who had made Elena's life a nightmare. It was time to expose them all, to make sure they could never hurt anyone again. The location was a warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It was isolated, hidden away from prying eyes, perfect for the kind of people we were dealing with. When we arrived, the place seemed abandoned, desolate, but I knew that the people we were here to meet weren't far. I turned to Elena, who was sitting beside me, her eyes scanning the area. "Are you ready for this?" I asked, my voice low. She looked at me, her expression unreadable, but I could see the fire in her eyes. "I've been ready for this for a long time," she replied. We stepped out of the car and made our way to the entrance. the cold wind biting at our faces. The door creaked as we pushed it open, revealing a dark interior. There were several figures inside, standing by a long table. Their faces were obscured in the shadows, but I could feel the power emanating from them. These were the people we had come for, the ones who could end it all. Charles was already there, waiting for us. He nodded at us as we entered, his face serious. "It's time," he said. We nodded, steeling ourselves for what was about to come. There was no going back now. We had the evidence. We had the truth. And we were going to make sure everyone knew it. The figures in the room remained silent, watching us with cold, calculating eyes. It was clear they were not pleased to see us. But it was too late. We were here, and we weren't leaving without making sure everything they had worked so hard to conceal came to light. The leader of the group stepped forward, a tall man with sharp features. He didn't speak at first, just sized us up, as if trying to gauge what kind of threat we were. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but carrying a sense of authority that made me tense. "You've come to the wrong place," he said. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." I stepped forward, meeting his gaze without flinching. "We know exactly what we're dealing with," I said, my voice firm. "And we're not leaving until you're exposed for everything you've done." The man's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought he might order us to be thrown out. But instead, he just smiled, a cold, humorless smile that sent a chill down my spine. "You're naive if you think you can take us down," he said. "You have no idea what you've gotten yourselves into. This goes far beyond Richard Blake. You're up against a network that controls everything. And when this is over, you'll be the ones paying the price." I could feel the weight of his words, but I didn't back down. "We've already paid the price," I said, my voice unwavering. "And we're not stopping until you're all brought to justice." The room went quiet. It felt like everything had stopped, like time itself was holding its breath. But I knew we were past the point of no return. We had the truth, and no matter how dangerous it was, we were going to make sure it came to light. No matter what it cost. The silence in the room was suffocating as the man's cold smile faded. And for a moment, I thought maybe he was right. Maybe we were outmatched, outgunned, and walking straight into a trap we couldn't escape. But then I looked over at Elena, standing beside me, her face as determined as ever. I knew in that instant that we couldn't back down. We had come too far, fought too hard, and sacrificed too much to let these people win. We had to expose them, no matter the cost. "This ends today," I said, my voice steady, though every muscle in my body was coiled tight with tension. The man regarded me with a mixture of amusement and disdain, clearly underestimating the resolve in my words. "You think you can just walk in here, make threats, and walk out unscathed?" He sneered, his voice growing cold. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." I stood tall, locking eyes with him. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," I said, every word sharp, filled with the certainty that had been growing in me. "And I'm done letting you pull the strings from the shadows. You've hurt too many people, including the woman standing next to me. And now it's time for you to face the consequences." The man's expression hardened, his eyes narrowing. For a long moment, the tension in the room hung in the air, thick and unyielding. And then, without another word, he motioned to the others in the room. It was clear now that the fight was not going to be over without a battle. They stood up, and I could hear the subtle click of weapons being drawn. I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up, but I didn't flinch. Elena stepped forward beside me, her presence steadying me, her own resolve clear. "We're not leaving until the truth comes out," she said, her voice firm. "And you can't stop us." The man's eyes flickered to the others in the room, and for a brief moment, I thought we might actually stand a chance. But just as quickly, the tension escalated. The room seemed to darken, the air thickening with an energy that made the ground beneath me feel unstable. It was a moment of pure chaos, one that I knew would change everything. But before anything else could happen, the sound of a door crashing open echoed through the room. I turned, my heart racing. In rushed a group of armed men. But they weren't here for us. They were with Charles. Charles Mason had done exactly what he promised. He had mobilized his resources. And now we had the backup we needed. The tide of the battle shifted in an instant. The leader's face twisted into something between shock and fury as the group of intruders moved quickly, forcing the room's occupants into submission. It wasn't over yet, but we had the upper hand. "You're finished." Charles's voice rang out from the door, calm and collected as always. The man standing before me now looked truly rattled. "You think you can just," he began. But Charles cut him off. "It's over. Your time has come. The evidence is out. Your network is exposed. There's nowhere left to hide." The leader's defiance cracked, his expression shifting from anger to something more desperate, a realization dawning in his eyes. The network that had protected him, the power he had built up, was crumbling right before him. And in that moment, I saw what true defeat looked like. We had done it. We had taken down the people who had ruled from the shadows for so long, and we had brought the truth to light. It wasn't just about Richard Blake anymore. It was about the whole system of corruption and lies that had been allowed to thrive unchecked. The room, once filled with tension and threats, was now emptying. The leader, along with his associates, was being led away in cuffs, their faces hard, but their pride broken. I turned to Elena, who stood beside me, her face still pale but now lit with a sense of quiet victory. "We did it," I said, my voice filled with relief. She nodded, but her gaze was distant, as if still processing everything that had happened. "It's over," she whispered, though the weight of the journey we had been on still hung heavy in the air. We had exposed the truth. We had fought for what was right. And now, justice was being served. It wasn't just the end of this chapter, it was the beginning of something new. Elena was free, and we were no longer running from the shadows. We had come out on the other side of this fight. And though the road ahead would be difficult, it was a road we could walk together, knowing we had done what needed to be done. As we walked out of the building, I could feel the weight lift off my shoulders. We had won. The truth had come out, and no one could ever take that away from us. We had fought, we had sacrificed, and in the end, we had made a difference. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we could finally breathe. And as I looked at Elena, I knew that we had done something truly important. We had taken down the darkness, and together, we had brought the light. In this thrilling black story, we follow the journey of Elena and Thomas as they uncover a dangerous network of corruption and deceit, with Richard Blake at its center. The suspense builds as Elena reveals the truth about her abduction, leading them on a perilous path to expose a powerful conspiracy. As they seek justice, they find themselves up against a web of lies that stretches from the highest echelons of society to the deepest shadows. With the help of Charles Mason, they fight back against the forces that have kept Elena captive and silenced the truth for so long. The story is a powerful tale of resilience, uncovering dark secrets, and standing up to overwhelming odds. In the end, justice prevails as Elena and Thomas bring the truth to light, revealing the hidden network that threatened their lives. This black story shows the power of truth and determination, with each twist and turn bringing them closer to their ultimate goal. It's a must-read for anyone fascinated by the relentless pursuit of justice and the unraveling of a powerful conspiracy. This is one of the most gripping black stories, filled with unexpected surprises and a strong sense of justice that will leave you on the edge of your seat.